There is a certain kind of quiet that doesn't sound like quiet at all. It hums beneath the surface of a person, like a secret vibration only they can feel. You notice it not in their words, but in the pauses between them, not in their presence, but in the soft way they try to take up less space than they actually do. People often call it shyness, or introversion, or reserve, but those are surface names, convenient labels, because what lies underneath is older, and heavier, and shaped by moments too small for the world to see, moments that still echo in the body long after childhood ends. This is the story of how childhood silence becomes adult loneliness, not loudly, not suddenly, but gradually, like a shadow stretching with the changing light. You see it everywhere once you know how to look. At work, in the quiet coworker who hesitates before speaking, as if measuring the weight of each word before letting it go. In friendships, in the person who listens beautifully but rarely reveals what storms or constellations move inside them. In relationships, where someone says, "I'm fine," even when fine is a word they've been using as a shield for years. It's a modern behavior to this quiet drifting inward. We see people sit in rooms full of others and still feel alone. We see them ghost conversations, not out of disinterest, but out of a subtle fear of not knowing how to belong, and we watch them retreat into the soft glow of screens, into curated worlds where they don't have to risk interrupting anyone else. And it's easy to assume this is adulthood responsibility, busyness, burnout. But what if this silence has roots that reach far deeper than adulthood? What if it began when the world was much bigger, and we were much smaller, and silence felt safer than being misunderstood? Let's take a step back into those early rooms, those early years, those early moments that don't make it into photo albums. Because for many people, childhood silence wasn't simply the absence of speaking, it was a learned survival, a strategy, a shield made of softness. Maybe they grew up in homes where emotions walked on eggshells, where you learned that the safest thing to do was to stay small, stay quiet, stay EASY, where you realized that speaking up could be dangerous, or burdensome, or simply ignored. Maybe they grew up around loud voices that swallowed their own. Adults who didn't ask, "What are you feeling?" Adults who didn't notice the shrinking. Adults who mistook silence for calmness, not knowing it was actually a child hiding in plain sight. Or maybe they grew up with love, but love that didn't know how to listen. Love that was rushed, distracted, distant. Love that filled the room with noise, but left no space for the child's inner world. There are children who learn early that their emotions take up too much space. Children who learn to translate their feelings into quiet compliance. Children who master the art of being no trouble at all, even when trouble was simply the human need to be seen. And over time, the silence becomes familiar, comforting, predictable, like a childhood blanket they carry into adulthood without realizing it. But here's the surprising perspective: that silence, the one they once used for protection, slowly starts to isolate them later in life. What once kept them safe now keeps them distant. What once prevented conflict now prevents connection. What once protected their tender inner world now hides it even from the people who want to know them most. And so a deep, reflective question rises: when did silence stop being a refuge and start becoming a cage? Most people don't recognize the moment. It happens quietly, too quietly to notice, like a tide that recedes 1 inch at a time. You grow up, you move through the world, you learn to be competent, independent, People admire your strength, your calmness, your ability to handle things on your own, but they don't realize, and sometimes you don't either, that the reason you handle things alone is because somewhere deep down, a younger version of you still believes that asking for support is an inconvenience, a burden, an invitation for disappointment. This is where the paradox begins. The people who were the quietest children often become the loneliest. Adults, not because they lack relationships, but because they feel emotionally unreachable within those relationships. They know how to listen, but not how to share. They know how to comfort, but not how to ask for comfort. They know how to show up for others, but not how to let others show up for them. And so they drift not away from people, but away from themselves. But here's the part we rarely talk about. Adult loneliness doesn't usually show up as isolation. It often shows up as being overly self-sufficient, or overly understanding, or overly accommodating. It shows up as the person who answers, "No worries," even when the worry sits heavy in their chest. It's the friend who says, "Take your time replying," because they've trained themselves never to need immediate connection. It's the person who gives others all the space in the world, because they were never taught how to claim any space for themselves. Their loneliness is quiet, polite, difficult to detect. It hides in the pauses between what they say and what they wish they could say, but don't know how. There's psychology behind it, of course. Patterns learned in childhood tend to crystallize into personality traits. A child who was rewarded for being easy becomes an adult who resists expressing needs. A child who was ignored becomes an adult who assumes people won't notice. A child who is shamed becomes an adult who censors their own emotions before anyone else can. And neurologically, repeated silence wires the brain to associate expression with risk and withdrawal withdraw with safety. The nervous system learns a rhythm: retreat, observe, contain, endure. But psychological insight only explains part of it. The rest belongs to philosophy, the way silence shapes identity, the way it quietly edits a person's sense of self. Because when you spend years swallowing your voice eventually learns to disappear. When you spend years minimizing your needs start to feel like too much. When you spend years being the quiet one, even the inner world becomes quiet, not peaceful, quiet, but lonely quiet. You become a mystery even to yourself. And yet, the emotional experience of this silence is incredibly vivid. It's the feeling of being in a crowded room and sensing a glass barrier between you and everyone else, thin, invisible, unbreakable. It's the ache of wanting to be understood without knowing what words to use. It's the exhaustion of carrying stories that have never been spoken aloud. It's the soft panic that rises whenever someone asks, "What's wrong?" and you realize you don't know how to begin. There is a sensory quality to it too. The tightness in the throat, the hollow in the chest, the slight trembling in the hands when vulnerability gets too close. The way the heart races when someone says, "I want to know you," and some ancient part of you whispers, "Are you sure?" It is paradoxical, cruelly so. The ones who crave connection the most are often the ones who struggle most to feel connected. The ones who long to be understood are the ones who learned not to speak. The ones who love deeply are the ones afraid to be seen deeply. And yet within that paradox lies the truth of their humanity, a tender, complicated truth that deserves gentleness, not criticism. So what do we do with this? How do we soften a silence that has lived in us for so long? Perhaps we begin not by forcing sound into the quiet, but by listening to what the quiet has been trying to say. Maybe the child within us was never asking to be loud, only to be acknowledged. Maybe the adult we've become is not broken, just unfinished. Maybe the loneliness we feel is not a flaw, but an old signal from a younger self asking to be found. And maybe slowly, tenderly, we can learn to speak again, not in grand declarations, not in sudden vulnerability, but in small truths. "I'm tired. I don't know. I wish someone would stay. I want to feel close to someone again." These are not loud statements. They are soft openings, doorways, new patterns, carved gently into old stories. Because silence is not the opposite of connection, it is the space where connection begins. And loneliness is not the absence of love. It is the longing that tells us love is still possible. In the end, we are all shaped by the quiet rooms we grew up in. We carry them within us like old houses, haunted not by ghosts, but by memories we never learned to name. But we are not bound to those rooms forever. Walls can be opened, windows unlatched, voices can return. So if you've ever wondered why you feel alone even when you're surrounded, why you struggle to ask for comfort, why your silence feels like both a home and a prison, or this, there is nothing wrong with you. You are not missing anything. You are simply someone who learned to survive through quiet, and now, slowly, you're learning something new. How to be held without disappearing. How to speak without trembling. How to belong without shrinking. Childhood silence may have shaped you, but it does not have to define you. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to be heard. You are allowed to let yourself be known, not all at once, but in gentle human-sized steps. And maybe, somewhere in that slow unlearning, you will find that loneliness softens, opening into something warmer, something truer, something that sounds, finally, like you.